From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
And it's great to have you along on the program today. And there's so much that we could be talking about, things that are happening around the world, around the country, and of course here in the state of Utah. But there's a lot of focus, and there should be a lot of focus on our election. Tuesday is election day, the off-year election, many mayoral candidates, city councils, and so on. So we wanted to spend some time and really focus in on that. Thus, I have already voted here in Holiday, where our show originates from today. Our ballot was relatively simple, but many people in the state of Utah are seeing a ballot that is unfamiliar to them, the ranked choice voting. And then also, there's been a lot of discussion about the viability and the accuracy of voting by mail. And as a matter of fact, Representative Christensen, who just barely resigned from the Utah State Legislature, he had called for audits, and he also really questioned vote by mail integrity. And so I thought with the challenges that are floating out there, we would go to the Salt Lake County Clerk, Sherry Swenson, who is on the line with us right now. And Sherry, it almost wouldn't be an election for me unless I had a chat with you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
First of all, let's tackle the new ballot that some are seeing. I had the opportunity of moderating a discussion. It wasn't really a debate. There were way too many candidates, but a discussion that unfolded in Sandy a couple of weeks ago. We had 8 people who wanted to be the mayor of Sandy, and the idea of ranking and voting came up during that discussion. Explain to us how the ranked voting actually works and what should be done to ensure the best result.
So, ranked choice voting came about by law that was passed by the legislature in 2018, and they allowed for municipalities, the legislative bodies of the municipality, to opt to implement ranked choice voting, meaning that when candidates filed, instead of a primary, they could eliminate the primary and then have the candidates that filed go right to the general election. So in the case that there were enough candidates to be ranked on the ballot, we would then list the candidates and have voters select them by their choice. And there were actually 10 municipalities that opted to do ranked choice voting. And so that's how it came about. And how it works is people then select their choices on the ballot of their preference of their candidates in the order of first, second, third. In the case of Sandy, they can go through in the mayor's race, and there's 8 candidates, and they can select up to 8 choices. They do not have to select all of the choices. If they only want to select 1 choice or 2 or 3, that's still okay. We will count the choices that they choose.
But if somebody were to only go one, for example, in the mayoral race out in Sandy, Utah, they only went 1 choice, and that person happened not to rank very high overall, their vote would just be out and ultimately would not really help make the ultimate decision. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the candidate receiving the fewest number of first choices is eliminated in the various rounds. So we call it phasing out, and that continues on through the process so that in the end, and that won't happen until the boards of canvassers certify the results on November 16th, but a candidate has to have a majority of 50% plus 1 in order to be the winner.
Will 3 choices usually do it, even in an expanded ballot like we see in Sandy? Or if you really want to make sure that at least you have a say in the election, should you vote even a little deeper or rank a little deeper?
So the thing I tell people is that they need to make the choices they feel comfortable with. If they don't feel comfortable and wouldn't normally vote for those candidates and those other choices, then I would say that they shouldn't vote for those candidates in those choices. They should make the choices they're comfortable with and the candidates that they feel comfortable voting for.
Is this something that you believe, gut feeling, you've done this for a long, long time, will this take root? Will even more municipalities, and are there other options in the future for it to go beyond our city council and council races and mayoral races?
Right now, the law only allows it to apply to municipal elections. This pilot project, which is in place through 2026, only allows for it to take place in municipal elections. There was a bill sponsored last year at the legislature, it didn't make it through, to apply it to the partisan primaries. I don't know if that will reappear. It could happen, but I'm not sure how that will play out. I think they want to see how people accept it, how they feel about it, how well it works in these municipal elections where it's being tried.
Mm-hmm. In the final moments that we have, let's talk a little bit about the voting by mail, which for many of us now has become kind of second nature and quite comfortable, but yet there are those who have raised concerns about it, even called for audits of elections. I think of Representative Christensen, who just so recently resigned from the Utah State Legislature. Your thoughts on the safety and the accuracy and the democratic process regarding voting by mail?
We have been doing vote by mail for many, many years in Salt Lake County, even before the law allowed us to apply it to all of the regular elections. We had a permanent vote by mail program, so we've literally been doing it for decades. The vote by mail process is very safe. And what I wish I could demonstrate to all of the voters, as I have done in many cases, is when someone registers to vote, they submit a voter registration form, whether it's online or a paper form, and they have to provide the last 4 digits of their social security number or their Utah driver's license number. Those numbers are then verified through the state to be accurate numbers. Once that happens, then we send the voter a voter information card. It's mailed to their address. If that isn't a valid address, that card would be returned to us. We would not make that voter an active voter. So when by-mail ballots are ordered, they're ordered only for active voters. And then every ballot that is ordered for an active voter has a unique ID ballot number, and that number is correlated to the record of that active voter in the database, the statewide database, and that database is administered by the Lieutenant Governor's office. And so it has to be correlated to that record of an active voter, a unique ballot ID number. Now, if that voter was to move in the meantime, and that ballot would then be spoiled and a new ballot issued for that voter at their new address, that unique ballot ID number for the address where they used to live would be spoiled or canceled. A new ballot with a different unique ID number ordered for that ballot or that voter. And so when those ballots are returned, that unique ID number for that ballot is scanned it's on the envelope with a barcode correlated to that voter's record of that voter having returned that ballot. And then they also have to sign the affidavit on that envelope. And we compare that signature for every ballot returned, and we have that voter's record from their voter registration form, sometimes other documents in our signature library. It has to match the signature for that voter. So the idea that anyone could insert ballots into our system, whether it be someone from another country, someone sitting in their living room, they would never make it through our system. It is a very secure system. And so, unfortunately, people don't understand the security measures that we have in place with our processes. I wish they could see it. I wish they could understand it. They would realize that vote by mail is secure.
Sherry, we thank you so much, as always, for joining us here on Sunday Edition. And to continue our theme of the voting here in the state of Utah this week, we're going to talk about the redistricting of the state. That's coming up next. It was earlier this week that our former Congressman, Rob Bishop, he resigned from the Utah Independent Redistricting Commission. And the reason that the former congressman stepped aside, he said, was because in the redistricting and the new maps, that have been drawn by the commission. He felt that not enough power had been given to Utah's rural area. And it's interesting because on one hand, yes, there's a lot of rural territory in the state of Utah. But if we are tracking with the population, 90% of it, according to the Gardner Institute at the University of Utah, 90% of Utah's population is classified as urban. So we thought we would address this, and I appreciate Katie Wright, who is joining us right now, and she has worked very, very hard on this issue from the very, very beginning, and she's with Better Boundaries. And Katie, first of all, before we talk about Congressman Bishop's concerns and rural versus urban, let's talk about what the commission actually did, the vote itself, the kinds of maps that emerged.
Yes, it's been an absolutely exciting week in Utah redistricting. I am very pleased to see that the 6 remaining commissioners unanimously approved 12 maps to recommend to the Legislative Redistricting Committee. Throughout all of this, they have kept top of mind the criteria that's in the statute passed by lawmakers, and they've ensured that the maps that they draw meet those criteria. And that includes things like keeping cities and counties intact, keeping partisan politics out of the process, and really ensuring that all Utahns have representation. They've done a fantastic job.
It's interesting that it would be unanimous because this is a very diverse group of individuals appointed and brought together by differing political parties, people holding different offices, different agendas, as it were, trying to be fair, bringing all these folks together and to have a unanimous vote on all of the maps. Is that correct?
Yes, on all 12 maps, so 3 each for Congressional, House, Senate, and State School Board. And I would add that I agree.
Yes.
Oh, it is impressive considering 3 were appointed by Republicans, 3 by Democrats, and we have both Republicans, Democrats, and independents serving on the commission. So it's a great example of putting politics aside to do what's right by everyday Utahns.
I was a little surprised at Speaker Wilson, Brad Wilson's response to this, and I believe didn't he bring Congressman Bishop on board? You can correct me on that if I'm wrong. And with the exit of Rob Bishop, the speaker seemed to indicate that this might be an opening or causing the necessity for the Utah State Legislature to pop the lid off this thing and work it over again.
Yeah, so you are correct that the speaker appointed Mr. Bishop and that those were his comments. And I fundamentally disagree. I think that Mr. Bishop's resignation is indication and demonstration that the work of the commission has remained true to the statute and the criteria. He wanted a map to be forwarded that did not have a majority of vote and did not perform well on the criteria set out by the statute. And the commission stood strong in making sure that the criteria and statute were met.
Many of the former chairmen have pictures that are.
I wonder if there were to be serious maneuvers to redo this system, how that would go over with the voters in the state of Utah, because they were really behind the proposition that brought this about. The legislature did work on it a little bit. We recognized, of course, with the Better Boundaries proposal that ultimately, unless the Constitution of the state of Utah were to be changed, that the legislature does indeed have the final say. But I would say that anybody who seriously messes around with this at this point does it at their political peril.
I agree. Utahns have been incredibly engaged in the process. In addition to having well over 500,000 people vote for Proposition 4, we've seen that Utahns are very engaged in redistricting. There were more than 2,000 comments on draft maps, over 1,000 community of interest maps submitted, and many, many more public comment and emails. And that is comparatively high to states with a much bigger population. So Utahns are engaged, they're paying attention, and they really care about gerrymandering and believe that voters should pick their politicians and not the other way around.
Now, what does happen now that the maps have been submitted? It was a unanimous among the remaining, save only Congressman Bishop, former Congressman Bishop, who resigned, a unanimous decision by the commission, different maps, among which, can be varying opinions, and the legislature can take a look at those. But what indeed will be the process and the timetable now?
Yes. So on Monday afternoon at 2 p.m., the Independent Redistricting Commission will present their maps to the Legislative Redistricting Committee. And we hope that a lot of Utahns tune in via Zoom or attend in person at the Capitol. And we know that a special session of the legislature is set to start around November 9th. And we predict that the Legislative Redistricting Committee will have a meeting prior to that and make recommendations to the legislative body. And so the hope is that maps will be adopted before Thanksgiving, but certainly there is a drop dead date of the end of the year.
Regarding elections, and I just have a second left, what election will this next affect?
It next affects next November's elections. So, of course, not this. And candidates have a right to start collecting signatures on January 1st. So this whole process needs to be complete by then.
We certainly appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much from Better Boundaries. And coming up in just a moment, we're going to be talking about one of the races in our one of our 4 seats. This will be the 4th Congressional District that we'll talk about, and some very interesting grassroots efforts that are unfolding there in the 4th District. That's coming up here on Sunday Edition. We have 6 federal delegation seats in the state of Utah, 2, of course, for the Senate, 4 for the House of Representatives, and 5 are up in the next election cycle in 2022. The 2, I think, that are garnering the most interest, and all are important, of course, but one would be the race with Senator Lee defending his seat in the United States Senate, especially with some of the Republican rumblings, and an independent now who has, that was Evan McMullen. We've had him on the show. We've had all of the candidates on the show already. And then, who knows exactly who will emerge on the Democratic side. The other race, honestly, that everybody's looking at, and again, not to detract or take anything away from the other 3 congressional districts, but the 4th district. It has been such a tight race, highly contested race since the very beginning of the 4th Congressional District itself. We've had the opportunity to talk with Jake Hunsaker before, who is seeking the Republican nomination and wants to have that seat. And Jake, one thing that we discussed last time, it was that you not only will be running as a Republican against Burgess Owens, but you'll be running against some amazing monies that will come in from outside of the state of Utah. We've seen this before, where the candidate isn't so much running against the local opponent, they're running against the national PACs, and the money that is spent is sometimes, well, it's flabbergasting, honestly. What are you seeing at this point? And I mentioned that we'd be discussing things with you because of the grassroots effort that you're seeing. Draw the comparisons for us, would you?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me back, Doug. Always great to be on the show with you. And you're right. This is a very important election cycle. We're just getting started. We're still about 9 months out. And there's going to be a lot of money involved in this race. We saw it in the general election last cycle. We'll see it in the primary this cycle because this race matters. And the behaviors and the patterns of the current representation in District 4, I think, are problematic enough that people like me and many voters here in District 4 are really looking for something better and something different. And that requires money to fight what we know prints money, which is extremism, it's divisiveness, it's tribalism and identity politics, which the incumbent here, I think, does a very good job at, unfortunately. In our first filing, I was very excited to see a really grassroots swell and response here in District 4 in terms of local dollars and local donors. Over 65% of our donors came from within the state of Utah, and over 60% of those donations were $200 or less. grassroots support is so essential, and especially in the face of outside money that has really funded most of my opponent's campaign activity so far. This is very notable. I think less than 10% of my opponent's monies so far year to date have come from within the state of Utah. That's something that concerns me. It's something that concerns voters here in Utah. We want representation and voices here on the ground that are funded by people who care about the issues that matter here.
It is startling, especially in our federal races, the amount of money that we see flow in from the PACs and the flow in from people who have interests in Utah, but they do not live here, and the money comes in from outside of the state. You know, one thing, since we just talked with Better Boundaries, we had Katie Wright on with us. Do you have any concerns about what the actual boundaries of the 4th Congressional District might look like, and will you even be in it?
Where I live in Riverton, we're kind of in the heart of the 4th District. I don't have any real concern that that will be drawn out of the 4th District. Of course, no one knows really what the boundaries will look like. But what I can say is this: I think Utahns and people across this country want, fair representation. They want their voices heard. They want elections to matter, and they want to know at the ballot box that their voice will ultimately help impact the direction that we go as a state and as a country. And I hope that the legislature will take those concerns into account when they draw the new boundaries. We'll see, of course, once we get the new boundaries, what that looks like in terms of the reality of this race specifically. But what I can say is that I am committed personally to better representation in terms of the 4th District, in terms of the current incumbent, Burgess Owens. We can do much better. We can find better solutions, and we can be much less polarizing and toxic in the way we approach leadership.
So many people that I talk to who consider themselves on the Democratic side somewhat liberal and on the Republican side somewhat conservative. Everybody in those center categories are complaining about how far the various parties have drifted, and it will be most interesting to see how this unfolds. And Jake, thank you again for joining us here on Sunday Edition. Sadly, we're out of time. We hope this gave you a little enlightenment on the election process and what is unfolding in the state of Utah. And coming up next here on KSL, music and the spoken word. Stay tuned.